Welcome everyone who's here in person, and to all of you who are on Zoom. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Ali Ahmida, who will be presenting on Confronting Silence and Invisibility, the Forgotten Genocide in Colonial Libya. This is very much part of the theme of our semester today in colloquium, which is hidden histories and silenced lives. The Italian fascist genocide in Libya is one of those things that is not really part of even post-colonial memory very much, at least in post-colonial studies. And most significantly, it is not really part of, or hasn't been at all, in genocide studies. And Dr. Ahmida's intervention in this field is to attempt to sort of decenter it from being a European-centered field of study to make it a global field of study. As we know, or should know, that genocide was a practice of colonial projects from day one until the current moment with the settler colonial state of Israel. So that's why the studies of genocide needs to be decentered and to include all of its practices. Dr. Ali Ahmida is a professor of political science at the University of New England in Maine. Dr. Ahmida was born in Waddan, Libya, and educated at Cairo University in Egypt and University of Washington in Seattle. He's the founding chair and professor of the Department of Political Science at the University of New England, Bedford, Maine. His areas of expertise are political theory, comparative politics, historical sociology, and anthropology. His scholarship focuses on power, agency, anti-colonial resistance, and genocide in North Africa, especially in modern Libya. He's also the author of The Making of Modern Libya, State Formation, Colonization, and Resistance, a book published by SUNY Press in 1994 and republished in 2009. This book was translated into Arabic and published in a second edition by the Center of Arab Unity Studies in 1999 in Beirut. He is the editor of Beyond Colonialism and Nationalism in the Maghreb, History, Culture, and Politics, published by Palgrave in 2000. Routledge Press published Dr. Ahmida's book Forgotten Voices, Power and Agency in Colonial Post-Colonial Libya in 2005. And Cambridge Scholars Press published his edited book Bridges Across the Sahara in September 2009. Also, again, republished by the Center of Arab Unity Studies in Beirut, Lebanon. Also the work Post-Orientalism, Critical Reviews of North African Social and Cultural History in 2009. The book that we will be discussing most is a book called Shar, A Hidden Colonial History, which discusses the genocide in Libya, or Genocide in Libya, Shar, A Hidden Historical Colonial History, which was published in 2021. And it won the Carl Brown 2022 Book Award from the American Institute of Maghreb Studies. I got to know Dr. Ahmida through his book in 1994, the book on the original book on the state formation and colonization and resistance, the history of Libya. And we have been friends and colleagues since then. You could say really that Dr. Ahmida has tried to fill so many gaps related to Libyan history, whether it is from 19th century to now, to genocide, to also all the cultural elements. He's written works on the Libyan novel, on sort of inter-Maghreb national connections. He's also presented works on Libyan migrants in Egypt during the Italian, almost every sort of gap, with many looming gaps that have dealt with Libya, Dr. Ahmida has had put his fingerprints on in order to try to fill. And so it is a great pleasure and a joy to have him here with us today to enlighten us on a missing and important chapter of Middle Eastern North African history, and also in the historicization of historiography also of genocide. So please, big welcome to Dr. Ahmida. And we are a small group, Dr. Ali, but we're try to be a boisterous one. And there are people, hopefully, who are following up on Zoom as well. So please take the stage, if you will.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Khalid, and thank you to your class for their interest, and also thank you to the Center of Middle Eastern Studies and North African Studies and to University of Michigan for inviting me to be with you this afternoon. I am delighted, and also your professor has been, as he stated, a colleague and a dear friend for many decades. And he is the one who has been engaging me and listening to a lot of my ups and downs while I was researching this very tough topic that started in the year 2000. And also, he is also the one who translated the epic poem of the brilliant Libyan poet Rajab Buhwaysh al-Manifi into the English language, and a beautiful translation that was included in the index of this a very complex book, Shar, a Hidden Colonial History, about almost literally 2 decades of research and thinking and writing. Let me start by asking the class, and I want you to be honest, because I'm going to tell you, you're not alone. Have you heard of the Italian concentration camps or the Libyan genocide before? Raise your hand so I could see you. Okay, very good. So two hands.
No more.
There are more. Have you heard of it through what kind of reading, if I may ask?
Yeah.
The first thing, it wasn't a reading, but it was the movie with Anthony Quinn.
Lion of the Desert, right?
Okay. Lion of the Desert is
Oh, no, I was going to say the microphone capture.
Oh, the microphone captures. Okay, they don't need to do. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so it's through the movie Lion of the Desert, right?
Yeah.
Anthony Quinn starring Omar
Mukhtar, yes.
Omar Mukhtar. And that was fascinating. And then just hearing kind of like podcasts on Italian colonialism in Libya and how it kind of just shaped it today.
Excellent. And Warsan, you also watched Lion of the Desert, I take it, right? Omar al-Mukhtar.
No, she hasn't. Somebody else. Anybody else?
Like Wikipedia or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mostly learned about it through a lecture in one of Juan Cole's classes. That was modern Middle Eastern history.
Oh, that's great. The let me tell you a story, and then I'll jump in with some of the main points and also the narrative about my research for this book. In the year 2005, I published the second part of what I called my trilogy, The Making of Modern Libya, Forgotten Voices, and Shar, A Hidden Colonial History. I really look at them as a trilogy. So at the included in Forgotten Voices, there is a chapter that really the cornerstone of the whole book. On my research between the year 2000 and 2005. And the book got a lot of attention from some of our leading universities. So I was invited to the oldest genocide, comparative genocide center at Yale University. And then after that to Brown, to Harvard, to Berkeley, to UCLA, to Washington University, to Georgetown, Columbia, and Temple, and other universities. And I tended to ask people, audiences, just to get to know, as I'm asking the class today, do you know about this? Where did you learn about it? And to my surprise, that none of the audiences in these universities knew about it. They were very receptive, very open-minded, but they really asked me, were there such a thing? And then I began to be alerted to a second question to my original research, which is I wanted to find out what happened between 1929 and 1934. The second question, why this case became invisible in modern scholarship. Not only in Western scholarship, the Arab world, like most people in this class, they learn about it through the movie Lion of the Desert, the story of the legendary anti-colonial leader, the heroic and also very, very much the founder of modern Libya, and inspired many, many other liberation movements and struggles, Omar al-Mukhtar, who was captured and tried in a really very, very colonial typical court, and hanged in front of 20,000 people. So I began to ask myself, I need to include in the research why and how this really horrific case became invisible. That's what I mean by invisibility. And before the invisibility, there was also silence. And to push the argument a little bit more, it was censored. So I included the question of silence and the consequence result, which is invisibility, and the fact that this case, nobody knows about it. Even when people who want to go beyond Eurocentric point of view, beyond the Holocaust, they will talk about the Armenian genocide, they talk about the Congo, the Congolese genocide, and recently the Namibian case. And my colleague at Harvard, Caroline Elkin, wrote about the repression of the Mau Mau and the destruction of the evidence, and the fact that she had to rewrite her dissertation for that. So this is really what emerged out of that is there are two, the investigating what happened and trying to find the primary evidence for it, but also the challenge of how to explain the process of silencing and making a colonial genocide invisible. And that really was very essential in my original research. And the answer was not easy. It took a while for me to find the answer for it in terms of European silence, especially in Italy. Still, is there is denial and there is silence about it. And our Western American universities, I decided to also investigate 4 areas, so 4 sites that will give you some sense why this case is unknown and repressed for a long time. And I ended by designing a research in 4 sources. The New York Times, our newspaper of records, and its representation and coverage of what happened under Italian colonialism and the camps specifically. The a popular magazine, National Geographic magazine, which is very well read, and what kind of articles was published there. Our Western scholarship on that sense, and also the movies, Hollywood, how Hollywood portrayed this case, and that allowed me to be thorough look at the latest places where knowledge is produced, and also mass culture and films as well. And to illustrate that, I put these quotes to just tell you about people don't know about this for a good reason, because it became invisible. And if we look at the late Prime Minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi, he said Mussolini's fascist dictatorship was much more benign dictatorship than Saddam Hussein's. And the one of my favorite philosopher, who I teach her work in my Empire and Genocide course and other courses, she had a blind spot. She said Mussolinian fascism up to 1938 was not totalitarian, but was just an ordinary nationalist dictatorship developed logically from the multi-party system. And of course, the governor of Libya, Marshal Pietro Badoglio, in a letter in the archives to Graziani, the vice governor in eastern Libya, in Barqa, in Cyrenaica, he said very bluntly in a letter, very well known now, and I have a copy of it, I got it from the archives, we must above all create a large and well-defined territorial gap between the rebels, that's the resistance, and the subject population. I do not conceal from you the significance and the gravity of this action, which may well spell the ruin of the so-called subject population. But from now on, the path has been traced out for us, and we have to follow it to the end, even if the entire population of Cyrenaica has to perish. And of course, one of the survivors said that every day in the camps, we had to bury 50 dead bodies, which is an illustration for that. So this is really how I started the research. I thought I'll finish it, 5-6 years. It took 10 years of field work, and I was frustrated with the Italian archives, which has been going on for a long time. I had 30 years experience with them. They literally kicked me out. And later on, an Italian historian revealed to me, said, listen, don't waste your time, son, in here. I spent 40 years, and those files either were removed or manipulated. Now, we might find some of them as the case of British Mau repression, but we couldn't find that those very critical files. Now, you might ask, what happened between 29 and 34? Italy, some of you are aware of, invaded Libya in they wanted to invade Tunisia, but the French took the Tunisia earlier, and Algeria before that. So Italy focused on Libya, and in 1911, October 3rd, they invaded Libya, which at that time was an Ottoman province by the name of Tarabulus al-Gharb, and sometimes Mutasarrafiyat Barqa, but the name of Libya is really resurrected after the colonial occupation. It was an ancient name, but the province is called often Yala Tarabulus al-Gharb, or Walayat Tarabulus al-Gharb. So the Italian modern armies and navy faced a very surprising voluntary armies and anti-colonial resistance that lasted for almost 20 years. And the last phase of it, some of you saw it in the movie Lion of the Desert, was the last phase. I mean, the resistance really was people oriented. People volunteered. The volunteers provided them with food, provided them with arms, and they supported them. So the idea of the concentration camps came for two reasons. One is to repress the resistance and depopulate, and second, to depopulate the fertile land, especially in eastern Libya, the Green Mountains, and the fertile land in eastern Libya, for Italian poor peasant and workers as colonial settlers. The other factors also in the Italian thinking was the idea that Italian immigrants are mistreated in North America and Latin America. We want a colony of our own. So therefore, the Libya not only became a colony, a settler colony, where their dream was to settle around between 500,000 and some sources almost 1 million Italian settlers in Libya. And therefore, it's not like other colonies. It's really like Algeria, it's like South Africa, Rhodesia, Palestine, Australia, other places, the Americas in that sense, and New Zealand. And it's not a colony in traditional sense. So this is how what are the main questions I started with? Were the following. Why the dominant image of Italian fascism as benign, lesser evil, and moderate in comparison with the Nazi German model of fascism, especially not only in scholarship, but also in the mass media, entertainment, films, what have you, and how that what are some of the moral and scholarly flaws of the myth of what I call the myth of Italian fascism? And third, how does this, recovered evidence of Italian genocide? And by the way, when I started, I didn't call it genocide. I only applied the United Nations Convention and Raphael Lemkin definition on it. And then I said it's genocide. There are two other Italian scholars before me who said that, and I wasn't really buying into that at the beginning. I wasn't sure that's really the case. So, but Alex Salerno and Professor Giorgio Rochat said what happened between 29 and 34 is a genocide. Is a genocide. So I came late to that because I thought the evidence was there. And the Italian, of course, just to give an idea about that in a minute, is they had a design for that matter. So how does the recovery of that, of a new evidence about the genocide between 29 and 33, 34 undermine common misconceptions concerning the nature of Italian fascism and the role of Italy, not only in the Holocaust, but also in recovering something completely overlooked called the Libyan genocide, colonial genocide. So this is really was the thinking, how it started and how evolved after that. Now, this is, of course, I thought maybe I'll show you a modern map of Africa as partitioned and divided by the colonial powers, and independence really echoed that colonial impact in the post-colonial independent states. And then I think a picture. This is the picture map of modern Libya, which also drawn mostly by the colonial state, but also echoed even Ottoman boundaries as well, to a degree as well. So this is really, as you could see, Libya is one of the largest countries in Africa, even though it's mostly desert, but the coastal areas and the oases in the desert are the only inhabited parts of the country. It's as big as Alaska, maybe, or bigger than Alaska in that sense, or Texas. The my research then began to target, to challenge three areas. Professor Mutawa is correct. My goal was not only to study Libya, but also I got immersed in criticizing the whole paradigm in genocide studies. And my methodology is really, and way of investigating is not traditional Middle Eastern studies, nor really area studies. I am, my methodology was critical, comparative, and cross the boundaries between Europe and the colonies, but also post-colonial, in that sense that I always argued in all of my scholarship as an Libyan American scholar, is that we cannot study one region without the other, and the other way around. And that attitude informed most of my investigation and my scholarship. So I challenged the dominant, historiographical view, and that sees Italian fascism as really moderate, and it didn't commit mass murder or persecution of Jews until 1938. It's a lesser evil. I'm here to really, my work, my recent work, is to debunk that very, very dominant model in our universities and our culture and our thinking. Second, I make the claim that the use of the nation state and a region in isolation really doesn't make sense. We need to kind of do a comparative critical analysis and bring also the post-colonial dimension of that's still with us even in the 21st century. Finally, I say that the study, if and you are studying with Professor Khalid Mutawa in this course, cases of settler colonialism, of course, but I want to really break these boundaries. I think Europe cannot be understood without understanding the colonies, especially in Africa and the Middle East, and vice versa. The idea of nationalistic old paradigm that you see things in isolation, to me, is really doesn't make sense, and it's really one-sided in many ways. So I was advocating a new way of thinking, and I also claim that the Holocaust not really unique. Not only it's not unique and has, there are other cases in Africa and Asia and Latin America that need to be studied. But furthermore, I investigated and I found evidence that the Holocaust itself has colonial roots, especially in the Congo, in Namibia, and the Libyan case. And my current research is really investigating the Nazi connection with the Libyan genocide. Now, when you look at the scholarship in more specific focus, you'll find three trends about the camps. The Italian colonial scholarship, which, by the way, folks, is still in denial, with a few exceptions. Even in textbooks and universities, that's why this book hopefully will change things in the long term. Right now, I'm probably pain in the neck for many established pro-fascism, Italian fascism advocates and apologists, whether in Europe, in Italy, or somewhere else. And also, what I do is I challenge the Eurocentric, what I call the Eurocentric genocide scholarship. And I spent almost 3 years trying to read all the major theoretical and case studies of modern genocide and theory of genocide. And that really allowed me to go beyond the parochial focus only on Libya, because my book is really not about Libya. It's also about rethinking genocide. And in that sense, I look at the regional, at the national and transnational way of thinking about genocide, in not only in the 20th century, but also 21st century, as we are witnessing terrible cases in front of our eyes, either the Rohingyas in the war in Gaza, there what's going on in the Ukraine and other places. I mean, unfortunately, genocide and mass killing is still with us nowadays. And also, I took a little bit of a critical view of the Libyan nationalist scholarship, because there is only one a master degree on the camps, and the Libyan Studies Center did collect the oral history, but they overlooked the camps. And by the camps, I'm talking about 16 camps that the Italian designed. I focused only on the 5 camps, which I thought that they are killing camps, because most of the death among the 100 to 110,000 people, where most of the death took place, were in these 5 camps. So therefore, I didn't cover everything. I focused only on the 5 camps. I also I acknowledge that there are people who stood out, had the courage and the critical mindset to not to be silent, and spoke about the Libyan case. Antonio Gramsci was aware of the horrors of Italian colonialism, even though he was in prison most of his life. Post-colonial intellectuals like Aimé Césaire, Frantz Fanon, Samir Amin, and Mahmoud Mamdani, all are very, very clear-headed about genocide, colonial genocide. And actually, Fanon thinks that there's nothing really weird about the Holocaust. The Holocaust was bringing colonialism to the heart of Europe. And if we remember Marx, what happened to the Irish people in Ireland is a case of genocide. The potato famine, I think we should regard it as a genocide. The third figure, he's one of the founders of modern social anthropology, E. Evans Pritchard, came with the British Army after the defeat of the armies in Northern Africa, and wrote a very polemical but very important book, because it was only 10 years or 8 years after the end of the camps, and he interviewed some people that I found very, very useful. And right now I'm excavating and reading his archives that are available. The fourth group of scholars, Giorgio Rochat, Angelo Del Bocca, Eric Salerno, and Nicola Labanca, they were really all are Italian exceptional scholars who refused to be silenced. And the American scholar at NYU, Ruth Ben-Gayat, my colleague, Ruth Ben-Gayat also was clear-headed about the silliness and the myth of benign fascism or lesser evil. So these are this is Eastern Libya, Barqa or Cyrenaica, as the name, the Greek name for Eastern Libya. And the camps that I focus on near Benghazi, called Terriya, Sawani Terriya, and then Sulug, the camp of Sulug, and then the camp of Sidi Ahmed al-Magroon, and then the camp of concentration camp of Brega, and then finally the horrible, what I call the Auschwitz of the Libyan genocide, called Al-Aqila, where the epic poem written by one of the interned figures, the poet Rajab Bouhouesh, ما بي مرض غير دار العقيلة, that Khalid Mutawa has a very, very, very much translated into English language in a really fine form, and now it's available, and people could finally read that. And let me tell you a quick story about this poem. When I was young, very young, and my grandmother is from Eastern Libya, and I come from northern Fazan, northern southern Libya, the region of Jufra, and I was born in Weddan. And my mother was born in exile because her father was anti-colonial resistor, and after the defeat they want to hang him, so he escaped into exile. When I was ill, I would say to her, "Mother, I'm ill," and my mother will, because of her culture, she doesn't answer you directly. She will either answer you through a poem, beginning of a poem, or a proverb. And rural Libya, that culture is very, very dominant. This is how people communicated with each other. And then I remember when I told her one time, I'm ill, she would say, "Ma bi marad ghair dar al-aqila," which is literally meaning, I'm not ill except dar al-aqila. And then I said, what the hell she's talking about? Me and my sister. And then only later on, I discovered my mother reciting the poem that hunted Italian fascism and violence by that poet who wrote that epic ode in the camps, describing what happened there. And then that became a very, very important source in understanding how the people the survivors, or the one who with the other one, with the other interned one, kept the memory and their own view of what happened to them. And that became really an important one when I studied the oral history among the survivors, and I interviewed many of them, men and women, and also began to discover that many of them wrote poems, and poetry was a very, very much the way they communicated and expressed themselves and their own views of their what happened to them then. Then I found some memoirs. The collected oral history by the Libyan Studies Center was valuable. The collection of poetry by University of Benghazi, and also I at the end of after going to the archives. And by the way, in 2012, I finally got access to the whole folders and files of the brutal general behind the genocide, Rodolfo Graziani. So I got his files, and I came home to Maine in America as if I had won the lottery. And for me, that was huge. So that was very important. And then finally, I decided to go with my camera to visit the location of the camps. And that visit, I took pictures. I took record of anything material remaining. So the material evidence with the non-material evidence became really very important in putting together and reconnecting the evidence and examining it critically as an investigating legal scholar, more than just a traditional anthropological, historical, or theoretical study. And that allowed me to be thorough and be patient with the evidence. Then I divided the evidence into 5 topics: the deportation, the daily life in the camps, the food, what they ate, and what and the clothes that they give them or not, forced labor, and also the death, why they died, and also the psychological trauma, like being ill, starving to death, and the trauma that associated with the death of thousands of those folks who were interned in these terrible and violent concentration camps. These are some pictures, because this is a picture of Suluk. And by the way, these tents were the people who were interned, they brought their own tents with them. This is Al Abyar concentration camps from an aerial view of it, aerial view of the camp. And this is barbed wire of the of one of the camps. Yes, this is they were really the Italian were very brutal in the sense that they wanted to crush the resistance. So anybody who was associated with the resistance, they hanged him. And by the way, I'm going to show you a picture. Please close your eyes if you don't see it. It's really horrible. So I want to warn you, and I'm really sorry for that. But also I included in the book. So close your eyes, because they did something like, severing the heads of the freedom fighters that time. And this is a mass grave. Another one. And these are some of the people that I interviewed in Agela. The Center of Libyan Studies gathered some of them, and they told me about it. So I flew from the United States, and I met them there, and they were telling us about what they remembered. Keep in mind, the survivors of the camps, they were between the age of 5 and 10 and 15. The rest of them, of course, they died and passed away a long time ago, either because of old age or illnesses. There's also other folks who were talking, including the gentleman with the cane at the left side. This is really a remarkable man. He is the son of one of Omar al-Mukhtar's deputies, and he likes me so much. I interviewed him 3 times because he has incredible memory, and he gave me even a gift. I think Professor Khalid Mutawa'a likes as well, a drawing of the concentration camp of Al-Agela, which I included in the book. Yeah, this is one of the gentlemen, yes, survivors. This is him, Muhammad Osman al-Shami, Al-Haj Muhammad Osman al-Shami. Unfortunately, he passed away too. Let's go back a little bit, Warsan. This is the one near with me with the silly hat and yes, this is in Al Abyar. I was interviewing one of the survivors of Al Abyar concentration camps, and his son was in the background, and it was near the mosque. So after the prayers, he sat with me, and I interviewed him for an hour and a half. And this is another interview in one of the locations. Let me add to you, because my research is interdisciplinary, and I did archival research as a historian, oral interviews as anthropologist, and field work, and also I looked at the literature, the poetry, and I had to spend quite a bit trying to become very versed and also acquainted with the vocabulary, with the meter, with the Libyan Shar Shabi, for that matter. And of course, I studied other cases so I could do a very much comparative analysis and not just case studies in traditional scholarship. Yep. This is this is in another town where I went to interview another survivor, and as you could see that. These are 2 historians who were kind enough to be my guide and my companions to show me the location of the camps. One to the left, Atiyya Makhzoub al-Fayturi, unfortunately passed away, and the other one retired, Dr. Abdullah Ibrahim. I'm still in touch with him right now. This is a lady, one of the ladies in Libyan traditional dress. I interviewed her in Sabha, and the South, also like the East, were connected with the camps. The western part of Libya is a really different experience. It also, face brutality, but this lady was in the town where I grew up, Sabha, and I interviewed her, and she had a remarkable memory. This is unfortunately a terrible picture. One of the leaders of the resistance, Suleiman Boumutari, and after the Kufra in the film Lion of the Desert, they cut his head. Yeah. And this unfortunately also shows you the brutality of the army, where the freedom fighters were captured, executed, and they severed their heads as a to discipline and spread fear on the population. Yeah. This is the capture of Omar al-Mukhtar, the legendary leader, one of the probably the most remarkable anti-colonial leaders and liberation movements. He looks very Libyan, with Libyan dress, with but he is really became a legend. I say to people, he's really a unique case of his own. Refused to retire, refused to be bribed, and led the resistance until the end. This is during his trial from the archives. Yeah. This is General Graziani, and I said that in the year 2012, 2014, I discovered I was allowed to look at his records, and also I found archival evidence in the city of Hoon and in French archives in Tunisia, and the Egyptian archives, and finally our American armies, when they invaded Italy and Europe, they also brought as a booty some of the archives, and I found them at the American National Archives, and they were very useful. This is a picture of me when I was in 6th grade. And I thought I'd show you how the story with my mother and my 2 grandparents were in the anti-colonial resistance really shaped my thinking as a Libyan American scholar, but also, unfortunately, listening to the oral traditions and the way outside the modern schools and universities was tremendous, because my modern education in Libya and Egypt and the United States did not really allow me to understand the culture of those folks who were interned in the camps. My mother and grandmother oral culture and oral history and poetic appreciation became very valuable, and I had to kind of re-educate myself about that background. All right. I think I'm sorry, I probably took you on a longer journey than I thought, but I wanted to give you an overview of a very painful and long research journey. Started 2000, and the oral history and interviews took 10 years, and the survivors didn't want to talk to me at the beginning, and they quizzed me, as I say in the book, very clearly. Finding the survivors, and after that, I began to connect the dots, and began to find evidence what happened then. And unfortunately, modern Libyan scholarship is very fragmented and very, very not very systematic. This is the first scholarly book, not only in Arabic, but also in a different about that horrible phase of history. And it wasn't just written for Libyans, it was written for actually modern scholarship. So people who are not interested, who not just about Libya, they could also see a new field emerging now, which is colonial genocides and the Holocaust as linked to it as well. Let me now stop, and probably you guys have questions, have comments, or anything that you might have in mind.
So my first question is,
Tell me your name. Tell me your name.
Yusuf.
Yusuf, yes.
So my first question is about what you're talking about in the beginning with making the Libyan genocide sort of invisible or portraying it as invisible.
Mhm.
I remember like 7 years ago when I took my first like world history class, AP World History, colonialism, when we got to the unit, it wasn't taught in the way that I think it should have been talked about, which was, mentioning all these genocides in North Africa, for example, and talking about the toll it had on the economy or on the people itself. And it almost feels like that part of history was, I mean, it for sure was whitewashed or watered down, not highlighting the negatives of it. I think, how can we kind of, as people, bring light to these issues that happened, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and really like revive the issue and topic, so we can kind of get a better understanding of what's going on in Middle East history today, or Middle East issues today?
Well, Yusuf, this is a very excellent question. And let me give you a comparable story. What happened in Tulsa in 1920 in Oklahoma was not recognized until 2 years ago or 3 years ago by President Biden. And we still, try to grapple with what happened in the burning of the Afro-American city that was thriving and prosperous. And now Native Americans, they try to unmake and remake American history, scholars of Native American backgrounds. I think, for many of you, this is exciting because there are two silences that we're still dealing with, not only the Libyan case. We dropped empire. We dropped the question of colonialism, and we became directed toward focusing on modernization during the Cold War, and also modernity in a really without the past. And history, as Foucault says, the interesting history is the genealogy of the present. And that will require a lot of honesty. And universities are part of the problem and can be also part of the solution. Universities are silent about empire, silent about colonialism, and reduce it to dates and names, because we are dealing with the consequences of a very, very, very complex institutions, way of thinking, a way of disciplining, way of seeing ourselves. And the university has been silent about empire in general and colonialism specifically, and that has to be revisited, because we need to kind of bring empire in and bring colonialism in and decenter our focus on the Holocaust, and include the other cases, and see the Holocaust not as unique but as interlinked with other places. That will require a lot of self-examination and honesty and looking in the mirror and confronting these issues, because the the dominant way of thinking is reduce things to cliches, or focus on Eurocentric thinking or modernization as a application of Western modernity. And that's really, any serious scholar cannot accept that nowadays. So I hope this book will help have a new agenda, research agenda, by confronting the silences and the invisibilities, and allow us to bring in back the interconnections, the linkages, and also how these things still matter for us today, because we have a lot to learn. In other words, that's these gaps and blind spots in our canons and our historiography, in our cores, need to be confronted. And your generation, I think, Yusuf, should have an opportunity to really confront these flaws that we still have even at the university level.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm James.
Hello, James.
I really enjoyed your talk. I thought it was fascinating. So I just wanted to ask, because obviously one of your main arguments is the recognition of fascist atrocities as being kind of disproportionately directed to European victims.
Mhm.
And I just wondered what factors you believe have kind of contributed to that as a selective memory.
Well, James, the problem is older. I mean, the focus in Europe as beacon of modernity has to do with also colonial ideology that sees its expansion and wars and suppression of others as a way of the superior races and spreading modernization for lesser and backward communities and peoples. But in the case of Italy, it's problematic because two factors. When I looked at that very closely, first, there was no Nuremberg trials for war crimes in Libya and Yugoslavia and Ethiopia for the Italian fascists and generals. On the contrary, the Allies needed Italian fascists to fight the war in Germany itself later on. And the second part, the second factor, I should say, Italy has one of the largest, most popular communist parties in Western Europe. And that really scared the hell out of many of the Allies, because they felt like trying the fascists will really empower and give this party that's very popular more ammunition, and Russia will have influence also in Italy. So these are the two factors were really big immediate ones. But there is also, I would say, let's face it, there is also the racism that what happened in the Congo, what happened in Namibia, what happened in Algeria. I mean, the French still are in denial about what happened in Algeria. These are the 3-4 cases that are glaring. And there's, it's always, I tell my students, don't compare these cases with the other cases, because that's silly. It makes no sense. I will also argue at the end, James, that by and large, in my opinion, I claim that most settler colonies are violent and genocidal. And that's why what happened in Libya, which was regarded not another colony, it was like in Algeria. The Italian fascists regarded Libya as extension of the mother country. The forchore, that was another name for Libya. So these factors were very important. And since there is no trial like the Nuremberg trials, there is no accountability, no apology. And in that sense, a new fascist party can become prime minister, as we have Miss Meloni, who is leads a new fascist party. And people say, oh, these just conservative boys, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's really washing, a whole the whole responsibility. And here I'm not talking about reparation. I'm talking about acknowledging morally and ethically the victims of Italian fascism. And I implied in my book also that the Holocaust, Italy was pivotal in the making of the Holocaust. That's why at the end of the book, which I hope that you will be able to read, I confront the 3 theorists very, very, very closely, and I give a critique of their work. The theorists of modern genocide, Michel Foucault, Giorgio Agamben, and I had really pain in criticizing the one I love, Hannah Arendt, but I put her to task for that as well. So we need to be alert and not to be fooled by the dominant paradigms.
I suppose as a follow-up, is there any kind of momentum towards maybe like petitioning the Italian government, or maybe even the Libyan government? And I know that's not in the best place right now, but maybe it could be kind of unifying to open some kind of truth commission or something, looking at trying to just uncover the truth, seeing as though we have an absence of criminal consequences.
Yes, I called for that earlier, and I think, James, that's a terrific idea, because the idea, if we want to have healing and we have reconciliation between people, then we need to confront the crimes. And unfortunately, the Libyan government under the September, President for Life, Muammar al-Gaddafi, made a really, some headways with 2008 treaty. And Berlusconi, who was a businessman, gave some vague apology to the Libyan people. But to me, that was really it was a good step forward, but wasn't good enough. I think truth and reconciliation, that also not only recognize what happened to the people in these camps, but also allow us to teach these courses, change curriculum, build the camps, have a museums, and really reconcile through a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That would be really the way to end this really silence and invisibility, but also anger and hatred and frustration with the crimes against humanities.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Abi, and I was wondering, so on the Truth and Reconciliation front, I've read a lot about Truth and Reconciliation committees when it came to the Pinochet regime in Chile, and also the Bosnian genocide as well. And I was wondering, what Truth and Reconciliation process do you think was very effective in modern history? And if a Libyan Truth and Reconciliation Committee were to pop up, which committee would you like them to model off of? Who do you think did it really well?
That's a good question, Abby. But I would say there are two commissions needed. One, the Libyan people have to really recognize the survivors' voices and compensate them, not the state itself, but compensate them and recognize what they are doing. But the Italian government, need to have and the Libyan government, they need to have a commission based on credible, respected figures to investigate the evidence, allow the findings. Especially this book is really almost kind of a trial of Italian fascism and atrocities that took 80 years. But a scholarly book is really about record and also documentation of what happened. And then also come up with I wouldn't say South African Commission, but maybe here we are talking about interstate commission between the Libyan and the Italian, and that should lead to number of specific things: release all the files on the camps, recognize the horrors of what happened under colonialism, especially in the camps. Third, change curriculum. Also allow people to visit the camps, and also have exchange of students, of people of different backgrounds, to learn from each other. Because the Italian public opinion, including the Italian youth, as somebody told me, they don't teach us nothing. There are only few pages, and that's it. So reproducing silence and invisibility continues until the 21st century. So I think this is where I will go. It will be two commissions, and it will be of a different kind, Abby. Not the South African. It has to do with the apartheid regime and the majority people in South Africa. This should be of a different type, and it will be maybe a combination of number of elements. And of course, this will be really the most serious step, for me, after writing this book and spending almost 2 decades investigating it. And had I waited a little bit, the case will be the fascists will have won, because thank God I started in the year 2000 and done most of the work by the 2010.
One more question.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Addie. I was particularly interested in what you said about with your personal experience, like having to reconnect with parts of your culture that were lost in the camps. And my family's Anatolian Greek, and so I kind of connect with that on a personal level. And I was just curious what arose in you or came up for you personally during the process of like forging that connection to lost parts of your culture. And then I was also curious, like when it comes to oral tradition, if you feel that it would be of any benefit to write these stories down to preserve them, or if you feel that there would be kind of a loss of significance or a loss of memory and connection in the process of writing pieces of oral tradition down.
Oh, I appreciate the question. These are very, very good questions. I would say I always, because I focused on anthropology when I was in graduate school, and I almost kind of had a subfield in anthropology. And I read all the critical studies of anthropology, anthropological studies of that decolonize anthropology itself. So when I was really kicked out of the archives and couldn't find any of the critical files, and I got that good advice to go and interview people, I learned about them from them, as they also educated me about the larger methodology. I mean, oral history now, we have a very, very established field that's very serious. But to me, theorizing interviews and in a reflexive way and understanding orality is not really a complement to written words. Orality in the human mind and human communication should be studied as a field of its own. And I feel like we need to take that even a little bit more. Professor Mutawa is a poet, and he has written, wonderful collection of poetry. But poetry is still, in many societies, plays a major, major role. And orality, and you said you are of Greek origins, one of the most classical epics, the Odyssey, was narrated in the Balkan and Southern Europe through oral traditions. And this is really true for many, many societies. So orality is, a very important one. And I would say, doing the research now, you have to be really trained and learned about how to conduct oral interview and do field work.
I'm going to take two questions from Zoom. One is from Jake Irvin, and the question is, was the general Italian population aware of the military efforts to colonize Libya? If so, to what extent, or did the Italian government try to hide the horrors from its own people? Meaning, at the time of Italian colonization, was the entire population aware of the military efforts? And did the government then try to hide the horrors from its own people?
That's a very good question. And the answer for it, is the following. First, the horrors were hidden and the sources were not available until later on. And second, the most, insidious, manipulative way, the generals who wrote memoirs and wrote books about the colonization of Libya tried to justify it as a way of modernizing the Bedouin, the nomads and the semi-nomads who have to be dragged into modernity, even if that leads to the killing some of them. So the propaganda was very effective and continued and challenged. And the problem in Italy, there are some few good people, but the vast majority of the academic, the political elite, the intellectual elite, even the beloved Italian cinema, realism and new realism, when it comes to colonialism, they are silent. The most popular one movie was Pontecorvo's The Battle of Algiers, was about Algeria, not Libya. So yes, the two factors contributed to this amnesia, collective amnesia, that you can't really, this case is still unknown because of the fact that there was a specific policy of not teaching it, not confronting it, and unfortunately, that's why the case almost was lost to us today.
Just to add to that, there was a famous song that the fascists used to sing, and it is something. It's addressed to a black girl. Here you go, black girl. We are taking you to school, and so on. So this Italian notion of civilizing the world, and they combine. I mean, they were probably thinking that they were addressing a girl in Eritrea or Ethiopia or so on. So they had that whole project. And then I think with the Italian colonial project, you had Eritrea, which was early on, and
yes,
then, which was in the 19 teens. And then you had Ethiopia, which was later and was a big involvement and a big war and so on. And so Italian colonialism had gone on for 60 years.
Yes.
And I think it went through different stages of building Italian nationalism, the various Italian governments making Italians feel like that they're part of Europe, because colonialism is part of how you become a powerful Italian nation.
Yes.
But it was different policies. I guess the question to you, Ali, is because of Libya was in a constant state of war with the Italians. There was a period during World War I when, in fact, Italy had only control of Tripoli, pretty much.
Yes.
Two cities. And then, so how did, maybe just connecting it to fascism, how did the colonial project in Libya, because it started before fascism, but it was embraced by fascism, how did it play a role in the earlier part and in the second part? And just to answer the question again, is that in fact the Italians promoted the colonial project to their people. They hid the atrocities, of course, but they promoted when there were cinemas were showing people going and settlers going and so on. So it was a project that was promoted.
Yes.
Was successful in getting soldiers.
Yes.
But they promoted. But then it's just a question of like, how did the colonial project play out in the royal government early on, and then in the fascist government? Like, how did they see fascism as advancing their causes or their national or their goals in general?
The original, you're quite right, Khalid, because you have first the Eritrean colony, which was purchased financially, and Eritrean actually peasants who became really colonial soldiers, which is a different story. But the defeat in Adawa in 1869 was a devastating, humiliating defeat for the Italian elite, who saw that that really disgraced the army. So going back to Ethiopia later on was taking revenge, and they committed atrocities there as well. I think there is a myth that the Italian colonial state before 1922 was not as brutal. I dispute that. I think they were very brutal, but you see the situation, the public opinion in Italy was different mindset. and the idea that of empire was normal in European thinking in late 19th century and the beginning of 20th century. So the advocate of empire was saw themselves as the French and the British and as the other ones, and therefore that was very, very important ideological mobilizing force. Second is also important, Khalid, is the Italian press and the Italian leaders and even intellectuals saw the colonialization of Libya as a way of modernization of civilization, because they tried to portray the Ottoman Empire as backward, as exploiting the natives, and they were delusional, thinking that the Libyan people will welcome them in 1911. So the situation in at that time was completely different. Now, the massacres that were committed earlier were terrible, and then the third factor, the resistance. Libyan people were organized, as I said at the beginning of my talk, and that resistance really caused and managed to deter the until 115, and the armies were defeated. For example, in the famous Battle of Gurdabiya, where the whole General Graziani's army, he lost his career because of that horrible defeat. And the resistance won so many guns and so many ammunition and so many horses and so many supplies that became very, very important. So I think that defeat also factored here. When the Italian came, the fascists came, they inherited the only fascist country that inherited colonies, because Germany lost its colonies after World War I. So this is the dynamics that informed the situation. It's true that at the beginning, the Italian colonial state negotiated with the resistance because of World War I, and they gave some self-rule to the Tripolitanian Republic and also to the Senussia movement. But at the same time, they did that as a way of adjusting with limited resources, with the war in Europe, and they when they came back, the brutality and the viciousness was, in my opinion, was unmatched that time in Africa. It's comparable to the worst colonial atrocities that we know of. And I studied, colonial history very well. That's my specialty, the colonial period. So I think these factors have to be put in. The tragedy, unfortunately, the Italian fascists never really tried, as I said. And the rewriting of that civilizing history, or we tried in Libya and we failed. We tried to modernize Libya and we failed, as if that's really the fault of the Libyans, which is very, very slimy way of trying to dismiss the whole case instead of confronting these crimes and these atrocities, especially the camps.
We have one more question from Zoom, from Momo. First of all, really thank you for introducing us to this issue of invisibility of genocide in Libya. I just want to ask a seemingly very simple question that I have written on my note while hearing your speech. Is that, what is your definition, or how do you define genocide? And I want to hear your thoughts on why colonialism maybe just inevitably and always brings on genocide. How do you define genocide, and why does colonialism always bring on genocide?
That's a good question. That's not a simple question. We in genocide studies now, we grapple with that all the time. I think to be, for the sake of limited time here, I would say the following. The father of modern genocide theory is the Polish Jewish, really a great fighter, Raphael Lemkin, who in 1944 invented the modern concept called genocide, based on a Greek word geno and Latin word sides, because he thought that what happened in the Holocaust was unprecedented, and he invented the word genocide. Before that, the word was not used before. The reference, also the second reference would be the UN Convention, which he was really the force behind it. He advocated as a refugee to the United States, escaping occupied Poland. He came to America and taught at Duke University, and then came to New York, lobbying for years until 1948. The conference took place in Paris, and also had a definition, accepted definition of genocide. I would say the genocide has three components that we accept now. I mean, there are a lot of wrangling, a lot of debates, a lot of things like this, and denials. First is that the definition advocated by Lemkin, intentionality, the intention to collectively wipe out a whole group of people. Second, you execute that plan and that intention by destroying physically, economically, culturally, socially, materially, a collective group. And third, you replace it by the colonial or the dominant force, culture, settlers, domination, or what have you. These three factors really give us a definition and condition of what we call genocide, or just atrocities, or a cleansing, or what have you. And unfortunately, genocide did not end by the Holocaust. Genocide is continuing today. And the people who perpetuate genocide, they are always, like in the Libyan case, they will deny and blame the victims of genocide. And I think what's really we need to do is not to be fooled, nor to be intimidated, and speak truth to power, as we say in the United States. And that's really what matters. Now, as far as colonialism is not, unfortunately, as you know, sometimes been erased, sometimes is seen as, in the old Eurocentric colonial ideology, as modernization and civilization. But we need to allow the people who went through it to tell us how they feel about it, especially in settler colonies that I advocated and argued that mostly they are violent and genocidal. And also we need to ask ourselves time and again, especially at the universities, you don't study colonialism only in history department or in some English post-colonial studies or so. It should be part of the curriculum. And the silence about empire and colonialism is a huge failure in our higher education.
Yes, Yusuf. I have a question focusing more on like the resistance of the Libyans. So, for example, like with Omar al-Mukhtar, he was a very successful leader, and even the Italians, who were his enemies, claimed for him to be like a noble enemy, and they kind of like spoke highly in the sense to his character. And so I was just kind of curious. I mean, when I look at the Libyans at the time fighting off the Italians, they're on horseback. They don't have, tanks like the Italians did. And they're just a bunch of tribes coming together. They're not like a organized formal army. I was just wondering if you could kind of speak more on the success of Omar al-Mukhtar and his resistance against, the Italian forces, and what that did for the Libyan people during that time.
That's a good question. The Libyan people were not just tribesmen. They had indigenous institutions, indigenous schools, indigenous social mobilization. They had they established one of the early republics in the whole Arab world called the Tripolitanian Republic. And they had a social movement, very brilliant social movement, based on Maghribian, Sufi, and reformist Islam called the Sanusiya, that for almost half a century focused on building schools and organizing trade and mobilizing the local community for self-governance. When the Italian came, they didn't just see Libyan they so I even dislike the word Bedouin, by the way, guys. I think it's an Orientalist term we need to abandon using, because it has a very, very bad connotation in the colonial language and narrative. And I think in that sense, we need to kind of learn more about it. And I hope that you are reading the book Genocide in Libya. That will give you an in-depth analysis of what I'm talking about, including the resistance. There was organizations, there were institutions, there were also self-governance that allowed the local people to resist for 20 years. And it's not just because they were armed or had some really forthright and ethically mobilized and strong leaders like Omar al-Mukhtar and others. The Making of Modern Libya has a whole chapter on the social origins of the anti-colonial resistance. So it explained that question, Yusuf, in depth. And the book that I'm sharing with you, some of my thinking in it, Genocide in Libya, a Hidden Colonial History, it gives you not only the individual heroism, the collective societal attempt to deal with calamities like settler colonialism, concentration camps, and genocide. And I think I hope that you will read the whole book, because that would give you more than a quick answer. And let me just end by saying, I'm really not very happy about Libya. Is not very well known as a country, even with the Maghribian and the Arab countries in general. And it bugs me when it's being reduced to Gaddafi, tribalism, fragmentation, and oil, and earlier, of course, terrorism. Libyan tradition, despite this smaller country, has a very complex, rich history. And the only experience that comes to mind is the Algerian experience. Unfortunately, sometimes we are led, not you guys, but we are led to see, let's read Libya through Tunisia, the exaggerated westernized model, or a little bit of Egypt, and forgetting the dynamics that are different. You could compare Libya to Algeria, and it makes more sense. And instead of trying to read everything through Francophonie Bourguiba's model, you read the dynamics that's in its own history, its own institutions, its own way of grappling with the modern state, including the post-colonial state.
Thank you.
Any more questions? I have one more question for you, Ali.
Okay.
I think we talked about this too, but of course, your answer to a Truth and Reconciliation Commission is very interesting. Is that the people who were direct victims of the camps and the genocide, they're all gone now, and what needs to happen is to memorialize, to remember, to affect how to admit to begin with, and then to make this history part of the Italian awareness as well. Of course, what we have is that it's also a very heavy legacy for the Libyans to keep, and even what to do with. We talked a little bit after, you talked about how the Allies wanted these former fascist bureaucrats to keep Italy from becoming communist. This is also in Germany, that not all of the Nazis were sent to Nuremberg. A lot of the bureaucrats and even the high, one of them ended up being head and general secretary of the United Nations, Kurt Volta. So there wasn't like all these top Nazis were, swept into the bin of history. Rather, that's what kept Germany going. Same thing with Italy. And so that was part of why maybe the Allies were interested or collaborated in the silencing. Not that their racism would have kept them from pursuing that to begin with. So that's why the Italians are silent and why they weren't interested in those. But for us, even in Libya, there were moments of this legacy being too heavy. Maybe you talk a little bit in the book about when the new nation state of Libya was rising, its allies didn't want it to talk about the Italian violence or even to seek reparations for it. And with time, it seems to be like a harder legacy to maintain. Or what can Libyans do with that memory, and why has it been such a hard thing to kind of sustain as a memory?
Very good. First, it was painful. It was complex, and there's a whole section. You're quite right, Khalid, in the book about. I think the founders of the Libyan independence decided that we are poor, one of the poorest countries in the world. We are really our cities are destroyed. We have high illiteracy rate. We have diseases and people who are exiled. We need to focus on regaining our strength, educating our kids, and also building the country. And they made an effort to say this is more urgent for us. We don't like the fact that there are other things that we have to postpone, but they decided that's the reality is that issue has been kind of put on the back burner. As American would say, you have to choose your battles. To say that their battles are important, but you have survival and your kids more important than anything else. So I think that I understand, but also I don't shy away from the fact that that case has been kind of put in the back burner. The September regime is more complex, Khalid. They came because the anger was, in my opinion, was really a delayed reaction to what happened before. But then it was used as a justification for a dictatorial, despotic, and authoritarian regime that silenced anybody that challenged the regime. So that complexity led to unfortunate result. Libyans, as I discovered later on, they don't know about the camps. They took it lightly. Oh, there is the Agela, and there is the Brega, and there is Rajab Buhweish. But what had happened? Have anybody systematically studied this? No. The truth of the matter, they didn't. Markaz al-Jihad, the Libyan Studies Center, did something remarkable. Maybe the only good thing, aside from Omar Mukhtar's film, financing it and building the center, which really collected an unprecedented way under Jan Van Sina of the University of Wisconsin, the late father of modern oral history. They collected some thousands of interviews. That didn't happen in any other countries. But at the same time, it became an ideological hero worshipping of Gaddafi and repressing anybody who will challenge him. The end result, Khalid, when I started my research, I did something just to be thorough and be fair. I interviewed 700 young college students all over the country. And the students, males and females in Eastern Libya and Southern Libya, they knew through their families, their grandparents, their grandfathers, grandmothers. In Southern Libya, the teachers played an incredible role. In Western Libya, they kept telling me they didn't teach us anything. If you ask many Libyans now, And you know that we talked about that before, Khalid. They don't. I mean, with the exception of people who have families or so, they don't know. Even inside Libya, this case, that's what really shocked me and almost made me go, crazy. Um, it's almost lost. And inside Libya, it was very fuzzy. The Arabs, they don't know much. Aside from the film Omar al-Mukhtar, they don't know much. And even, as you know, Libya is the least known in the Arab world. And there is this typical caricaturistic picture of Libyan culture and Libyan society, reduced to Gaddafi and oil and Libyan tribalism and all of that kind of cliches. Outside Libya, we as I try to share with you, the silence and the amnesia because of certain factors continued. So this is really a sad case, but I hope that the 20 years of diligence and research, and even my hair is gone. I had used to have a glorious hair, guys, in the old days, and my eyes on my side even declined. Was worthwhile at the end. And I hope this book will open, not resolve everything, but open a new phase where people will read it, debate it, ask questions as you guys in this class with Professor Mutawa are asking me, and really break the invisibility.
I just want to add that I'm hoping that there will be other chapters, because when we think of this case, we think of here's a resistance leader. He fought. It served the Gaddafi regime to show that the only thing that the confrontation with the colonizer was the military and so on. But in fact, with every colonial regime, there isn't a colonial regime that didn't have an apartheid system. Every colonial regime had something. With Algeria, Tunisia, well, you think about Rosa Parks not being going on the bus. Well, the buses all over the colonial world were like that.
Yes.
Even dress code and so on. Forced labor, very much the same. All over the place there was forced labor. You talked, Ali, about Eritreans coming to serve in Libya, serving the Italian military. Also, Libyans were forced to go and fight in Ethiopia. So in essence, when you talk about the colonial system, it isn't, genocide is one of the mechanisms, but apartheid is another one in civilian life, forced labor is another one. There are so many things that still remain untold when it comes to the Libyan story, which is really should be just all of the horrible modern tools that colonialism had, that when we focus only on resistance or genocide, even there we might be not seeing the whole picture of the wide array of repression and oppression that colonialism exacts.
Yes. Khalid, I agree. Yeah. I think the Libyan case is one of many. My whole thinking and theorizing is to make it part of the larger patterns that you talked about. The other thing that's also important to keep in mind, that colonialism was not just the atrocities, the camps, the apartheid, the racism to justify colonialization, but also the way, the knowledge, colonial knowledge, that is still entrenched and hide behind the idea of either silence or modernizing the natives. And I think this way of thinking, this way of constructing identity, this way of the canons of literature and historiography and theorizing the philosophy of genocide, and so that's still insidious and indirect and still with us today. And I think that's where I would like to see classroom scholars, research, talk about it as we are doing today. And that's really what is going to reveal, these assumptions, these canons, these modalities, but also allow us to open, new, liberating, and for that matter, I know that's become kind of a cliche, really, to decolonize the curriculum.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ali. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it very much, Khalid. And thank you to your students. You take care, guys.
Okay, you too. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.